My name is Dr. Chris Jenkins, and I am the CEO of the Orianne Society and the host of the Snake Talk podcast, the podcast where you learn about nature's most feared, maligned, and persecuted animals. I invite you to listen to this conversation, and maybe you'll find that what you perceive as fear is actually rooted in a deep fascination. Welcome to the Snake Talk podcast. We are continuing our student perspectives series, and I think we have a pretty good one today. I am here with Catherine Hanks. She is a relatively new graduate student at University of Georgia. Go Dogs! I'm a adjunct down at University of Georgia, and as is another one of my staff members, we do quite a bit of work there. I think very highly of the university and some of the colleges and all of that there. So, and Catherine's also working on some interesting projects for her graduate thesis that are related to a lot of the work that we do at Orianne Society. So it makes it equal or even more interesting to me. So welcome to the podcast, Catherine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm excited. So I like to start at the beginning. And, a lot of people think that, things like snakes and turtles and salamanders are very odd things. And, we all kind of live and work outside the box of a lot of society, if you will. And so I like to learn the origin story. So tell us a little bit about how you got into working with these types of animals. Is this something that started in childhood or something that started later in life?
For me, I think it was definitely later in life. As a child, I wasn't really exposed to amphibians or reptiles or anything like that as much as I am now. Because I grew up kind of in the suburbs, didn't really play out in nature a whole lot. But then when I got to college, I really started kind of finding my interest in that because I always really loved animals my whole life. And something about reptiles and amphibians specifically kind of just drew me in. And so when I was in college, I kind of went that route and started working with them, doing research with them, things like that. But yeah, definitely not something that was always with me.
Yeah. So you mentioned growing up in the suburbs. Did you grow up in Georgia, around Atlanta, or were you somewhere else in the country?
Yeah, it was around Atlanta. Yeah.
Gotcha. So you grew up that typical suburban lifestyle on a weekend, doing whatever, playing soccer, going to the mall, not out trouncing around in the swamps. I'd be curious to ask you, because I have a similar story. I don't know if you've heard it. I've talked about it in different places, but I was always into wildlife, but I really got into reptiles and amphibians a little bit later. It wasn't, I guess I was interested in them when I was young, but it wasn't like the story a lot of herpetologists have. And what really, while again, I was into all wildlife and I remain very interested in all wildlife. I love mammals and birds, everything, and mushrooms. And I know they're not wildlife, but you get the idea. I love nature and consider myself a naturalist and spend a lot of time outside observing everything. But the thing that originally interested me in reptiles and amphibians, amongst all these other things I could have potentially worked on, was they just had they were just fascinating to me, and the details of their biology. I mean, I know all animals have very detailed biology, but I guess it was just reptiles and amphibians are so foreign in a sense as compared to even a black bear or a white-tailed deer that just some of these interesting details like predator defense that an animal might have, or how they, carry their eggs on their back or whatever it might be. It was just really interesting and fascinating to me. And I really drilled down into those details and then, ultimately decided it was a pretty good niche for my career and moved on. But I'm just curious, you mentioned that you started to get interested in them. Is there anything you could pinpoint, like, kind of like I just pinpointed what originally drew me to them? Is there something about them that drew that interest when you were in college?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that just like the biology of them is super fascinating. Like, there's not a whole lot of wildlife that are like reptiles and amphibians. But yeah, when I got to college, I knew I was looking through all of the course lists before I'd even picked a major. And I was looking at they had a herpetology course at the University of Georgia, and I was like, oh, I really want to take this course because I've always been, somewhat interested in them, but I never had the chance to like kind of explore that in depth or really interact with them much. So that was just kind of one of the classes that I knew I wanted to take. So my sophomore year of college, I got the opportunity to take that course. And then I think from there, it kind of launched, launched my interest like really deep into it.
Gotcha. And who taught that, Dr. Mayers?
Yeah, it was Dr. Mayers and Dr.
Excellent.
Carter.
Okay.
Yeah, they both
Yeah.
co-taught.
Gotcha. And so you went to University of Georgia for your undergrad as well. What was that decision like? So again, you're growing up in the suburbs. You love animals in general, but you don't have a lot of outdoor experience per se. And you decide to go to UGA. I mean, did you decide at that point? Did you know when you were going to UGA that, oh, I want to go in and become a biologist or a forester or a wildlife biologist, like something in our field? Or did you just go to UGA because it's a great school and it's, in, the state you're from and all of that? Basically what I'm getting at is, did you even know going into UGA that you wanted to be in this general field, or were you like kind of went in unknowing or wanting to be a history major or whatever it might be?
Yeah, I really didn't know what I wanted to do graduating high school, but I chose UGA because it's a great school and it has a lot of options for me to do, and it made sense financially. So it made a lot of sense for me to go there, and I'm happy I did because it's a great university. But yeah, I was actually an undecided major for a while. I didn't like declare a major entering my college career. So yeah, after a while, I chose ecology as my major because I was looking through all the course lists to just kind of see what classes I'd be interested in taking, and they all kind of fell into that sphere of like wildlife, of environment. And I talked to the ecology advisor, and she really kind of talked me into it. She convinced me, and I was like, okay, this seems like the path that I want to go down. But it definitely took a while for me to get there and to decide that this is something I'd want to do. Even though I always loved
Yeah.
animals, I didn't really see it as an option.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you that because you mentioned herpetology, the
Mhm.
herpetology course, but obviously that's going to be like a higher level course that people typically take later on. So I was curious, again, I don't mean to keep drawing parallels, but there are some parallels between our career. Mine just happened many years before yours, but I was the same way. But for me, it was like a single class, meaning I was taking all my gen eds and I had a different major, and I was working on that. And then I took a wildlife biology course, and like that just was like open the floodgates. And from there, it was just everything changed, and I was all in. But that's interesting to hear that like yours was like the concept of like, yeah, all college students, they pick all their courses each semester, and you have guidance because there's certain things you have to take and so on. But just looking at the course book, the course offerings, you just started to realize that all the things that interest me are actually in like ecology generally. So you went that direction. That's kind of fascinating. Was there one, outside of the herpetology, I want to get to that next, but kind of early on, was there like one class in particular that kind of hooked you, or was it just the whole, kind of everything together
I
once you
think,
started taking those
yeah,
ecology?
for me, it was kind of more everything together. Just because like my first year when I was undecided, I was taking like mostly just gen ed courses to, get all my requirements that I need, things like that. And then like after I declared my major, I could start taking those upper level like ecology, biology, wildlife classes. So like it was really like just by my sophomore year, I was taking all of these ecology courses and all of these like herpetology related things. And that like really made like that, honestly, by that point, I was like, okay, I definitely have made the right decision because I'm loving what I'm doing now. And then my junior year, I actually got the opportunity to study abroad in Costa Rica and to take more ecology classes that way, like in that environment. And that was really cool to kind of solidify my passion for the subject in general.
Okay. So let's, I do want to talk about Costa Rica, and UGA has a field station there. I'm assuming that's where you were. I've been there
Mhm.
a few times myself, but we'll get to that in a second. But, so with your coursework during your undergrad, so you realize you kind of want to be in ecology. Was it at that moment, like when you were looking through all these ecology courses, where you're like, even within that, you're like, oh, all this herpetology related work interests me? Or did you kind of get into the ecology and then find yourself either like taking the herpetology course you mentioned, or, or another course and then kind of moving towards that? Did it kind of happen at the same time, or was it in the process?
It was really more of a process. I chose ecology first before I chose like any specialization because I was like, well, I love animals, I love the environment, I love ecology in general. Once I figured that out, and then yeah, I was looking through all of the different wildlife courses to take, and I knew I definitely wanted to take herpetology. I also definitely wanted to take ornithology, which I also ended up taking. So I definitely didn't like specialize in herpetology until probably my junior year, where I realized like that was my where I was most interested in the sphere of ecology.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you were able to go to Costa Rica, and did you go to the UGA field site there, or were you somewhere else?
Yeah, we did. It was, I think now it's owned by CIE and not UJ as a whole. But yeah, it was a UJ program, and we went to that field site. And we also got to travel around the country too while we were there. So we didn't stay at the one field station the whole time, but it was very cool.
Yeah, and that field site for the audience is kind of up in more mountainous regions. It's up near Monteverde. Um, Costa Rica is actually like a really diverse country, like topographically, elevation wise. There's rainforest and high mountains and so on. And so, but the UGA site's kind of up in the mountains and these like cool, wet, well, relatively cool, wet forests for Costa Rica. And so, talk a little bit about your time there. First of all, how did you even get the opportunity to do that while you're at UGA? Is it a competitive process? Is it just a class you sign up for? But then talk a little bit about your time in Costa Rica and, kind of like more the coursework, like education side of it. And then I do want to talk a little bit about like animals you saw there and those types of things as well.
Yeah, so the process to get into it was just they had an application for this study abroad program, but it was pretty a pretty simple application. Like it wasn't too involved, but then they selected people based on that. It was a pretty small cohort we had. It was like less than 20 students who actually went on this trip, and we were almost all ecology majors, so it was like pretty small within the school. It's a big program for that, and we went for like a semester, so it was like the fall semester of my junior year where I went. And yeah, once I got there, we took a lot of courses. Like one of the courses was ornithology. I took that there. There was also just an upper level general ecology course, a tropical ecology course, um, things like that. And I also took a research course where I got to design my own project. And that was kind of my first foray into like the research aspect of what I do now. But yeah, so it was a really cool program, definitely.
Yeah, talk a little bit about your research project, even if it's not reptile amphibian related, but like how did you go about developing that and what did you end up doing? Did you find anything interesting? Those types of things.
Yeah, so for that, I kind of well in I'll back up a little bit for context. I in my herpetology course, we had a part of that was doing herpetofauna surveys. So we went out to like the forest that the Warnell School owns, and did surveys of amphibians and reptiles in that area. So I was kind of like already on that train when I went to Costa Rica, and I wanted to do a similar thing there. So I did a survey of amphibians and reptiles in that region, and I compared like the habitats between like the streams that were there and the forest environments, and then like the more road environments that they could live in, and just kind of looked at what was there and like how kind of the communities were different in those different habitats. But it was really
Uh,
cool. I got to go out herping every night basically, and just see really cool animals. So I enjoyed it a lot.
did you find major differences in, reptile amphibian communities between like streams, forests, roads, those types of things,
Yeah, I did. I
or
did definitely find some differences. As you'd expect, like more, generalist species would be like more in the roads. Like I remember seeing like a ton of leopard frogs just in the road every night after it rained, and then in the streams would be more of like more hylidae species in there that I'd see. But yeah, there's definitely, and then like a lot of the leaf litter frogs, like the little crogasters in the forest. So there's definitely like the differences that you could see there. But it was very cool to look at.
yeah. Huh. And so how about when you were down there, were you able to see many snakes? Did you bump into any? I mean, I know that's
Yeah.
not the snakiest part of Costa Rica. There's definitely a lot of snakes there, but yeah, what would you see for snakes when you're in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I saw some of the like pit vipers that were really cool. I saw I saw a couple fertilances, which I was really excited to see, but obviously want to stay away from those a little bit because they're highly venomous. But very cool to see. But yeah, there was
Did
a
you see
ton
any?
of cool wildlife.
Did you see any of the eyelash pit vipers up there? Or?
Yeah, yeah. I said those were the pit vipers I saw. Yeah, the eyelash ones. They were really cool.
Yeah, I've seen some right in that area. There's also, if I remember right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe it's not there anymore, but I'm pretty sure is Monteverde. I mean, obviously, it's the name of the park in that area. Is
Mm.
it also the name of the town right outside the park? What's the name of that town? Or do you remember?
I I don't remember. I know Monteverde is like near there. Yeah. Um,
But anyways, there's a town right near Monteverde, pretty close to the UGA property, and there's a serpentarium um, there in that town. That's actually a pretty good serpentarium. Were you able to go to that when you were there, or no?
no, I never heard of that, but that sounds really
Oh,
cool.
yeah, they had. If I remember right, they had a lot of the snakes that you'd find in Costa Rica, and Costa Rica has pretty good diversity. But anyways, worth researching if anybody's heading to that area. Okay, so you spend that semester in Costa Rica, and you're getting more deeper into your ecology major, and you're taking more and more herp oriented courses. Before we leave that kind of like time in your life, what there's so first of all, there's great if somebody wants to study herpetology of any type, including snake ecology or biology. There's so many great places around the country, but I would say I've always said that in the Southeast, UGA overall is one of the strongest schools for that. So why don't you speak to like in your undergrad a little bit, just like you mentioned, it's not like there's a herpetology class. You mentioned that there's multiple herp related things, but you might just talk about kind of UGA relative to herpetology and what's offered and just so people who are listening to this thinking about going to university might have some perspective.
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you have like the main herpetology course, which is really important, and that kind of really launched my, I guess, herpetology career. Not that I'm anything but a student still, but that kind of launched my interest in it. Um, and outside of that, there's a ton of like cool research opportunities. There's a lot of freedom to like kind of do your own projects and also help other people with their field work. Like I know the mayor's lab does things all the time where like if people are doing research on reptiles and amphibians, you can usually like go out and help with sampling in that aspect. Um, and just in general, I feel like they provide a lot of connections, a lot of cool opportunities like study abroads or like connections to give you internships and things like that. And just in general too, like it's a great area for it just because the Southeast is like really diverse and like salamanders and things like that. Like I think it's just a really cool area to do research. And there's a lot of different avenues to kind of get your herpetology fix. You can go out herping, find some cool stuff. I like doing that just for fun. There's also like a club at UGA too, the Herp Society Club. So I've gone out herping with them. They have a lot of cool talks. There are people coming in and talking about their own research. So yeah, there's a ton of cool opportunities at UGA.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So you did this field course down in Costa Rica, and then so you're back at UGA, late in your undergrad now, and you mentioned all these kind of opportunities to do research or work with labs, work in the field with grad students and others probably. How much of that did you do? Did you do any kind of like undergraduate research beyond the work in Costa Rica? Speak to that a little bit, if you would.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a break and tell you guys that snakes are one of the most persecuted groups of animals in the world, but we are dedicated to changing that. The Orianne Society works every day to ensure there's a future for these amazing animals. If you care about snakes, wildlife, or wild places, and you like what you've been hearing on the Snake Talk podcast, support us today by donating on our website at www.orianne.org.
I did my undergraduate research in Costa Rica, and then I came back, and after that, I kind of started to get involved in the Carver lab where I'm doing my master's right now. But I didn't do any more like specifically herpetology research until the summer of my junior year, where I had an internship at the Memphis Zoo. So I worked there on their dusky gopher frogs and that program. So I was there for a while, and then and then like outside of that, I did a lot of like just things with the Herpetology Society Club, and just kind of like finishing up my research from Costa Rica and still continuing to learn everything I can about herpetology in general.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about those gopher frogs. You don't have to talk about the frogs themselves necessarily, but talk about Memphis. I'm assuming they had some type of captive breeding program that was part of a conservation of the species. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it was a really cool program because the dusky gopher frogs are critically endangered. So it was very cool to work with them. And the Memphis Zoo has a captive breeding program where they breed all these frogs and release them into the wild. And then they keep some as like an insurance colony. But yeah, I was working on research there where we kind of looked at the differences in, we did an experiment where we divided we had an experiment with like, I think it was like 40 frogs, and we divided half and half, where half of them were in the indoor enclosures and then half of them were in outdoor enclosures like microcosms, where it was like simulating their natural environment, but it was still controlled, so there wouldn't be like any predation or anything like that, and it was still on zoo grounds. But so we looked at the difference in those two groups to kind of see how releasing these frogs would impact them, and how we can improve the captive breeding system to make it better for release in general. So we looked at a ton of different parameters in that. We looked at like jumping performance, which was cool because we just got to like have a little runway where we jumped the frogs on, which was fun. And we looked at like endoparasites, and we looked at obviously like mass and SVL. And then we looked at skin microbiomes. So yeah, there's a ton of different parameters to kind of test the differences between these two groups. But it was a really cool project to work on. I really like the dusky gopher frogs a lot.
Yep. And so you mentioned, in that same time frame, you started to get linked up with a particular lab. It's Dr. Culver, is that the name, correct?
Dr. Carver. Yeah.
Carver, excuse me. And so talk a little bit about that process, because I think this is an important lesson for a lot of people who are coming up through their career. Like, everything you can do, meaning like these study abroad experiences, getting summer internship or work experiences like you're talking about with the gopher frogs, as an undergrad, getting linked to a lab that's doing the types of things you're interested in. All of these things are going to help your career. And obviously we're going to get to it, but you're in that lab now in graduate school. So, I mean, that's the best way to get into graduate school. I'll tell you, I mean, there's a lot of ways, but, to know where you're going while you're an undergrad. So talk about, first of all, how you ended up, kind of first connecting and how you ended up getting involved in the lab and what you did there kind of in that undergraduate stage.
Yeah. So, I kind of got to know Dr. Carver, because he was a recent kind of incoming professor to UGA, and he was building up his lab. And I worked with him as a PLA for the Ecology 1000, just kind of intro level class. And that's PLA is just a peer learning assistant, which is basically just an undergrad version of a teaching assistant. So I just kind of helped with that class, and he was teaching that class. So that's kind of how I got to know him. That was the second semester of my junior year where we met and started talking to each other. And I knew he was building up the lab. So I was wanting to set up meetings with him to kind of talk about, to see if I could also fit into this lab and help out and do some research in that sphere. So yeah, that's kind of how we got connected, which was a really cool way to do it, because I already, had worked with him and I knew kind of a bit about his personality and work style.
Yeah. And, I mean, for the audience, I mean, I did at least going from my bachelor's to my master's, I did the exact same thing. I stayed at the same university, and it was the connections I built during my undergraduate that got me into my master's program. So I didn't have to go out on this. It wasn't as competitive then, but it still was. Now it's just insanely competitive. Go out on this competitive market and just try to apply for, MS projects that pop up on Texas A&M job board or something like that. So it is a really good approach. And so how did your connection to that lab then translate into, the potential to start a master's program?
Yeah, so I kind of got lucky because he was building up his lab. So he had space, which, I know some professors, when you're looking, don't have a ton of space in their labs. So I was lucky in that aspect. And yeah, when I was working with him in undergrad, I did mostly wombat things, because he does a lot of wombat research. So I was making a website for treatment delivery methods for wombats with sarcoptic mange, things like that. So that was kind of what I did in my undergrad. But kind of as I got closer to graduating, we talked a lot. We had a lot of meetings about what would my potential master's project look like, if I was able to stay in the lab and keep on doing research with him. And he was really supportive through the whole process. He was very willing to take me on as a master's student, which I appreciate. And he was very valuable in kind of walking me through that process as well, what the application process to get into grad school would be. And just kind of figuring out, and it was helpful too, because we started talking about my project before I even graduated undergrad. So we were able to ask people to be on my committee and talk about project planning before I even had my bachelor's degree, which was very nice for me. And that process was still stressful, don't get me wrong, but it was a lot nicer to be able to already have these connections than it was to just like you were saying, search randomly on job boards and finding a professor who you don't already know. So it worked out well.
Yeah. So you basically, before you even started your graduate program, or maybe even before you applied, you had a general idea of what your thesis was going to focus on. And so it sounds like that was very collaborative, meaning, you're discussing with Dr. Carver and you guys are coming up with ideas, but talk a little bit about a little more depth about that. How did you develop the ideas for your specific master's thesis project?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on indigo snakes in my master's project, and we kind of talked a lot about that. Like, Dr. Carver knew about my interest in herpetology, and so we were kind of like talking when we were talking about my master's project about things in the herp related fields, and he was also interested in like that whole system of like the gopher tortoise burrows and the indigo snakes, because he did a lot of wombat work, and they have cool burrow dynamics in that system as well. And he's also really into disease, and I was interested in kind of looking at the snake fungal disease aspect of indigo snakes. So it just kind of like, it was in all of these conversations, it just seemed as like that was the system that would be most interesting to kind of both of us with that project. And it took a while to like form like, actual specifics. Obviously, like there's a lot of logistics and like actual like narrowing down the research questions. But for the actual system, it was pretty well established early on into the discussions, because like, and he had connections at the Orient Society. So I did get to go down and do some indigo snake sampling still during my undergrad, which is the field work that I'm basing my project on now. So it was very cool the way that worked out.
Yeah. And so for the audience, at the Orient Society, we basically, in partnership with Georgia DNR, we monitor indigo snake populations across the state every year. And we have been taking snake fungal disease samples for a number of years now. And I won't get into details. Maybe you'll talk about a little bit more as we get into depth on your thesis project. But interestingly, we've looked at prevalence of snake fungal disease in a whole suite of species across the state. We've even done sampling in the mountains and other places. So, but indigo snakes have incredibly high prevalence of snake fungal disease. The majority of indigo snakes that we catch, test positive. So that's just a little context and background for your thesis project. But so talk a little bit about the specifics. You said you had the general idea, working on disease and snake fungal disease in indigo snakes. You even kind of did some preliminary work in your undergrad with some of our staff. And so where, talk a little bit about like specifically what your thesis is designed to look at relative to indigos and disease.
Yeah. So right now I'm kind of looking to study how seasonality impacts snake fungal disease in the system. So basically we have this system where like the fungus really is temperature dependent. And this like ectotherm immune capacity changes based on temperature as well. And it seems like that there's this seasonal trend in snake fungal disease as you go throughout the year. It peaks like at certain points, like in indigo snakes, it seems to peak in like January and February, and then it kind of like tapers off. So I'm just kind of trying to study these dynamics and kind of see how seasonality like impacts the system, how these drivers of disease dynamics kind of work together. And so for that, I'm really looking at like creating I'm going to try to create like a mechanistic model of this hypothesis of seasonality kind of driving ectotherm immune capacity, which drives like the disease dynamics that we see. And then I'm also going to kind of try to describe the dynamics of the disease just based on empirical evidence. So like data that I'm going to collect like in field work with the Orient Society in partnership with them. And also like looking at like kind of the long-term data set that the Orient Society has to just kind of see like what these trends are in more of a long-term setting as well. But I am really grateful to work with you guys in the Orient Society and have this amazing opportunity to do field work and see all of this cool data.
Yeah, well, it's great to work with you as well. And it's a very important issue. And so with the seasonality, almost what you're hypothesizing is not that, the environmental conditions are affecting, how much of the fungal disease is in the environment. You're hypothesizing that it's at those coldest times of the year when indigo snakes are their body temperatures would be the lowest on average. It's driven, prevalence in indigos is driven more by their ability to fight off the fungus. And so you see it more that time of year when they're cold. That's kind of what you're hypothesizing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, driven by like the immune capacity, because they don't have as much of an ability to kind of fight off the infection as they would. So there's a little bit of a mismatch, like in at least it seems there seems to be a mismatch in between like when the fungus is most prevalent in the environment and when the snakes actually have like the most disease. And I think that gap is probably caused by just the differences in immune capacity that they have in different temperatures. So yeah, it seems like when in the colder months when they don't have as much capacity, there's more prevalence there.
Yeah. Well, in Georgia, indigo snakes in the winter are highly dependent on gopher tortoise burrows and some other types of refugia, but it's primarily gopher tortoise burrows. I mean, do you think there's any, independent of the seasonality, do you think there's anything about gopher tortoise burrows or other kind of underground refugia and snake fungal disease? I mean, any wild speculation or do you just think it's everywhere? Or do you think, for example, it's thrives in these burrows for one reason or another?
Yeah, I think the burrows could definitely provide like a nice hotspot for the disease. Just because like the fungus itself, like it's a more stable condition for them to be in, and it can stay like in these like kind of cool and wet conditions that the fungus thrives in. So yeah, and then the snakes are down there all the time. So I think that's definitely a really important refuge for the disease, and that's probably how a lot of these indigo snakes get it, is through the gopher tortoise burrows, at least in this period of time.
Okay, and so our monitoring is largely focused around the colder months of the year, and I'm assuming to do a good to get to sample the seasonality that you're looking at. I mean, obviously you can get that seasonality within those colder months, but do you have plans to try to survey indigo snakes at other times of the year, meaning through the warmer months when they're in other habitats and more spread out, or are you going to primarily sample through those winter months?
I think the primary sampling that I'm going to do will be through the winter months. Like I have plans to go down and sample like January through March of next semester. But yeah, past that, I probably won't, just because the Orient Society does most of their sampling like within that period of time, and I will have to actually take classes as well at some point too. But I think that like even if I don't have like the actual field data that I've collected in other months, like there are data that I can use in those other months that I don't personally collect, but I can still have that data to kind of get the spread.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I'm sure indigo snakes are incredibly difficult to find in those winter months. I mean, it can be done, but it's very difficult. Talk a little bit about. Well, no, we don't necessarily need to go there. But so let's go to kind of where are you in the process? Are you very early on, like you've just decided what your project's going to be? Have you been doing a lot of field work yet? Kind of where are you in the process?
Hey everybody, I just wanted to take a break to let you know that you can stay connected to the Orianne Society by signing up for our monthly newsletter. Be the first to receive exciting updates on reptile and amphibian conservation, from the latest news and staff blog posts to exclusive announcements like upcoming Snake Talk podcast guests. Go to our website at www.orianne.org and sign up for the newsletter at the bottom of our homepage.
Right now, I'm in my first semester of my master's. The end of my first semester, really. But that semester's looks like I've been taking like a lot of classes. I've been working as a TA. And I've been like building my committee and just kind of talking about project specifics and logistics and things like that, and also synthesizing all of the literature, and kind of like starting to get an idea of where the pre-existing literature is and how I can incorporate that into my research. But yeah, I have plans to do field work starting in January. So I'll be next semester, I'll focus primarily on that. Like I won't be taking classes or being a TA. I'll be doing indigo snake sampling from like January through March. And then times when I'm not doing that, I'll be, continuing like the literature side of things and the modeling side of things too, because I haven't been able to focus on that a lot yet. But yeah, so that's kind of
how. Talk a little bit. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with this, but for the audience, talk a little bit about how would you got an indigo snake in your hand? How would you figure out if it has snake fungal disease?
Yeah, so just kind of visually looking, you can see some of the lesions that are associated with this disease. And like, I know the Orient Society has a protocol, which I would also be following in my research, where you swab the snake to kind of see like if they actually have snake fungal disease or not. But yeah, there's visual signs just with the lesions themselves, and then they can also be sent to the lab. Like those samples are sent to the lab, and you can do like qPCR to kind of test for the actual DNA of the fungus. And that's kind of how you like confirm to see if like there actually are clinical signs or if it's just like possible. So
gotcha. Okay. So great. So you'll be out with our field crews a good part of the season then, helping do the surveys in general, but also, collecting samples on all the snakes. So that's great. So you're early on in your program. You're about to start your first field season, although there is quite a bit of existing data, as you've mentioned. And last thing I want to talk about with your thesis specifically is you've mentioned a couple times now, but this modeling component. Like, talk a little bit more about what this, I'm assuming this is kind of like the culmination, the ultimate part of your thesis. Talk a little bit about this model and what you'll be modeling, what types of factors are going into it, those types of things.
Yeah. So, full transparency, I've not like started to build this model yet. So I don't know exactly what it's going to look like at the end of my project. But yeah, it's essentially just to create a model of how this would work, like how this seasonality and changes in immune capacity would drive these disease dynamics. So there would be like a lot of parameters going into it, like obviously like seasonality and like a lot of immune capacity factors could go into it. And
I was going to ask you, what are immune capacity factors? So obviously temperature, snakes being ectotherms, or as some people say, cold-blooded, they, it's related to temperature, but what are like other factors that would allow you to measure that?
Yeah. So like when you're actually measuring snake immune capacity, there's like a lot of ways to do it. I think I'm going to focus more on like the complement system. So like things like bacterial killing assays to kind of see like how well snakes respond to disease and things like that. But there are also, like, I've seen a lot of studies too that have looked at like corticosterone levels, which are related to immune capacity, even though it's not like, a 1-to-1. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but I think the complement is kind of what I'm focusing on.
Okay, great. And what do you think the value of the results that you might find? Like, how, would they be useful in the world? Is it just straight biology? It helps us understand how the world works better. Are there applied applications? What are kind of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, it is just any question surrounding snake fungal disease is inherently important just because we don't know like a ton about it yet. Like obviously people have done great research on it, but it's still like a relatively new area of research that we're getting into, and it's not fully understood. So definitely providing a better understanding of that in general. And then also like with indigo snakes specifically, because like they are like a threatened species, I think it could be helpful in conservation applications as well. If we can kind of figure out like maybe what's driving these disease dynamics, it could better help us figure out like how to deal with the disease in the future, and like maybe like if there are any negative population level impacts, or if there's any treatment options people want to try, things like that. So I do think it's very useful to look at, and I'm excited to see what I find.
Yeah. So last question, this is just kind of complete speculation. It's kind of outside the scope of your thesis, but with snake fungal disease, you see this in many places. We've seen it in our sampling across Georgia. You see different prevalence rates in different species. So, for example, I mentioned indigo snakes have very high prevalence of snake fungal disease. There are other species that also have high. There's some that are kind of all over the place, and there's some that we rarely find with it. I'm just curious. So that's just which snakes have it. And then there's, I don't want to say the more important question, but ultimately a very important question is, which snakes does it potentially have an impact on population? I mean, you can have a snake that, every snake in the population has it, but it doesn't impact them at all. And it's really not that big of a deal for the population in a sense. But the question I'm getting at is, how would you speculate if you start to think about other species, say in Georgia, like you talk about immune capacity affecting, prevalence as we see it in indigos. Like, how might you speculate on some of this variation we see, like among species? Is it related to like immune capacities? Is it something to do with habitats they use? I mean, again, I know you're not studying this. I know we haven't studied it, but like, do you have any speculation about that relative to immune capacity in particular?
Yeah, I think there definitely could be, because obviously immune capacity varies based on species and even on an individual level as well. Like it's different with each individual snake. But yeah, I think immune capacity could definitely be a part in that, based on each species of snake. Also, probably like habitat use. Like if they're indigo snakes and they're living in gopher tortoise burrows, or I know like a lot of the water snakes too, like the Nerodias, like they get a lot of snake fungal disease, it seems, because like the fungus can also be in that environment. Also just characteristics of the species in general. Like I don't know, like how thick their skin is or how big they are. Like it's a keratinophilic fungus, so that could definitely have an impact of like the, I guess, kind of impacts that this disease would have.
What's describe what keratinophilic is
It's
for our audience, if you would.
Yeah, they eat the keratin. So basically, like the keratin in the snake on the scales, they're gonna get in that way. It's the fungus. That's what they eat essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, anything else you want to mention about your thesis before we leave that?
I don't think so, other than the fact that, I'm just getting started, but I'm excited to see what I find when I go down this route.
Good. Okay. Well, you're early on, like you've said, but what does the future hold for you? Do you have any perspective on, where you want to take your career, what you actually want to do for, your job someday? Are your thoughts to go get work for a while after this, or you plan to go on for a PhD? Do you have no idea? Basically, what does kind of the future hold in your mind?
Yeah, so my current plan is to get my master's, and then after that, work for a little bit. I haven't like decided yet whether or not I actually want to get a PhD or not, but I definitely do want to get like some more work experience after my master's, and hopefully that will be like in the conservation herpetology kind of field, or at the very least like some broad ecology field, and then just kind of see where I go from there. I don't have any like specific like this is exactly what I want to do yet, but just kind of see where I'm at. Hopefully I can keep doing things like this because I really enjoy herpetology and conservation. So I love this part. So hopefully I can keep doing that in the future.
Gotcha. Well, you've been making all the right moves and sounds like you work hard. So if you keep at it, I'm sure you'll be successful.
Thank you.
So I like to have all of my guests tell me a snake story. So, Catherine, what's your best snake story?
Good question. I'd say my best snake story is probably when I was in Costa Rica. I was out herping for my project and also my friend's project, who also had a herp related project, and I was helping him with collecting his data. But yeah, we were both out herping, and he did almost step on a fertilance, and I got to see it like rear up, which was really cool to see. But luckily he didn't actually step on it because he saw it in time to like back away. But that was like one of the only times in my life where I was actually like a little bit scared of a snake. I was like, oh, I do not want to mess with that venom. But
yeah, was he wearing rubber boots?
Yeah,
like
he
you
was.
often do in Costa
So
Rica?
he probably would have been fine, even because he had boots on. But
yeah, was it
like,
a big fertilance? Or?
Yeah, it was pretty big, and to see it like rear up like that it was cool, but it was a little bit scary in the moment.
Yeah, they're big snakes, and they can, depending where you are down there, they can be very common. So, yeah. Anyways, okay, great. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I've enjoyed our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Yeah, and I just wanted to thank the audience and tell everybody to remember, snakes are animals too. And it's a privilege to see one in the wild.